You all joining us on Happy Friday. Soon after this, hopefully people might be thinking about the beverage of their choice. You'll need it after this conversation, no, but just want to thank our panelists too. We have an awesome team of folks that have offered to volunteer their time, share their insights and stories as to process and decision making that they have gone through. I just want to share with you, this is the third CEO dialogue that we have done. We have done them on different days, and we're planning on doing them every Friday from 2 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. This was a request and an idea of our various key committees. Great idea that they brought up, just to give an opportunity for CEOs to get together to share information through this time where everybody is trying to figure out the right decisions to make. So just want to share with you, so next Friday we do have a conversation. We're addressing workforce challenges next Friday, so you'll hear from us then. But let me just share with you the format for today. I will quickly introduce our 4 panelists, and then they will share with you a little bit about the organizations that they lead, the meetings that their organization has, and some of the decisions that they have had to make in this COVID-19 environment. And then we are looking forward to your questions. As Heidi mentioned in the Q&A, please send your questions into us. We have Karen Bernstein, who's one of our team members who has been awesome in putting these conversations together. She's going to help aggregate some of those questions, but we will answer those towards the second half of our conversation. And again, as Heidi mentioned, we will be recording this session. So please be aware of that, and it will be available. So I did want to mention, although we have our CEOs sharing their stories, the 2 representatives we don't have are a legal counsel on this panel, and we don't have somebody that represents the insurance industry. Obviously, our CEOs can share perhaps what they feel comfortable sharing with you, but also would certainly recommend, obviously, that you touch base with your insurance carrier and your legal counsel on your specific issues. So anyway, let me get on with it and introduce our 4 panelists. Many of them are fellows of ASAE, the first of those being Lori Anderson, FASAE CAE. She is the president and CEO of the International Sign Association. Hi, Lori.
Hello.
Yay. We have Colleen Bagnosco, CMP CAE. She's the executive director of meetings for Association Management Center, which is an AMC, and she represents multiple associations. So hi, Colleen. Thanks for being with us.
Hello.
And then we have Christy Tarantino Dean, FASAE CAE. She is the Chief Executive Officer for the Institute of Food Technologies. I should say. Christy's joining us from Chicago. Hi, Christy.
Hi everyone.
And rounding us out, we have Irving Washington, FASAE CAE. Oh my gosh, so many initials. Executive Director and CEO of Online News Association. Irving, great to have you with us as well.
Hi everyone, and happy Friday. I like to remind people what day it is these days.
Yes, they all blend together, don't they? So I would like, if we could, we have a great diverse group of panelists representing trade as well as professional associations, large meetings and small. So I think you all will get some great takeaways from today's conversation. So I think we'll get started with Christy. If you can share with us the organization you lead and a little bit about your meetings.
Sure, thanks Amy. Hi everyone. The Institute of Food Technologists is a 501c scientific society of individual members representing 15,000 R&D scientists primarily, but also scientists who work in food safety, food quality, packaging, and academia as well. We have a very robust student association of 3,000 members and academics in food science programs around the world as well. Our annual event typically has 25,000 attendees, with 20% of those coming from outside the US. We have a large B2B trade show with 1,200 exhibiting companies, more than 100 scientific sessions, more than 800 research posters, and a number of ancillary events and social functions and experiential events that accompany our annual event. This event represents 70% of our annual revenue and was scheduled for mid-July. We began discussing in earnest what the impact of the virus might be on our event in January, because we typically have a large Chinese pavilion on our exhibit floor and also a large number of attendees from China. So we began conversations about our with our broker for our event cancellation insurance, as well as an adjuster around what type of claim we might have at that point, thinking for a portion of losses for our event. And as the news of the spread began to unfold, we began financial scenario planning and having regular meetings of a COVID team that included our CFO, the head of our marketing and communications area, our education leader, myself, and a few key staff. And as Amy mentioned, began speaking regularly to our attorneys and eventually weekly conversations with our insurance provider. We identified that we have 117 contracts related to our event, so it's very complex in terms of various cancellation clauses, etc. So during January, February, we began identifying whether we should have a hybrid event, as we did not previously live stream. We recorded sessions, but we never live streamed any of our content, and we did not have any virtual aspect to our trade show. And so in February, we began getting a lot of pressure and into early March from our exhibitors about when we would make a determination about the meeting. Our exhibitors invest significant dollars, not just in their booths, but also in prototyping food samples that they can show on our floor. And it's a tasting show where people can get a sense of use of the newest flavors, trends in flavors and ingredients. And so they invest a lot in, the ingredient companies invest a lot in developing those prototypes. And there were other large food shows in early March that canceled very last minute, really having a detrimental financial impact on particularly smaller food companies and startups. And so it made them really nervous about what we were planning to do. And as things continued to unfold, it became clear that many of our stakeholders were becoming increasingly focused on keeping the food supply in this country and around the globe moving. While R&D scientists don't typically work in plants, many of our members and leaders were beginning to tell us that they were being asked to be on standby to work in a plant should they have any employees who test positive for the virus or need manpower in general. And we've seen this play out just in the national news in the last week or so, with Smithfield Pork having to shut down a plant completely. And so it became obvious to us that even in the best scenarios, our attendance would be dramatically reduced, you know, and whether or not we would have any attendees, you know, present, even if we should get the all clear in May or June. And so there were a lot of factors, obviously, that we took into consideration in making the decision to postpone or transition our event to a virtual event. And we came as a staff to the conclusion that we should transition to virtual. We had been talking to the executive committee of our board about these options over a series of their regularly scheduled calls. But we had a board meeting coming up in the middle of March that we transitioned to virtual, and we brought this this conversation to the board with financial scenario planning, what it would look like if we got no insurance, had to pay all of our 35 hotel cancellation penalties, same for all of our other contractors, whether we got a portion of our event cancellation insurance, and so on. we decided to split the decision over 2 days so that they could have the opportunity to think about it overnight. As I began the conversations with our officers, it became clear that it was hard for them to imagine not having the event. Many of our leaders started their membership in IFT as a student, so they've been coming to the event for 20 plus, in some cases 30 plus years. And so as we just designed our board discussion, we realized that it may need just some time to sink in for some of our board members. So we began the discussion with all of the financial scenarios and the facts on one day, and then the next day had follow-up conversation. And at that point, they did make the decision to transition to a virtual event completely. And really that decision largely came down to our vision, where we talk about a safe, nutritious, sustainable food supply for all. And many of our board members had us come back to what is our vision and what do our members need to focus on, and how we continue to be that resource for our members in that area, and also have brand equity with our exhibitors moving forward. So we announced to our key partners and membership via a very scripted and timed announcement in an order of importance on March 30th. We had started prior to that beginning to vet virtual platforms that could handle the complexity of our event to some extent, really vetting some in parallel, and continue hopefully any day now finalizing our virtual platform, as well as some plug-in platforms to help us accomplish as much as we can. We obviously continue to speak with our insurer and document our claim, and have begun the process of offering our exhibitors the opportunity to roll over their funds to 2021 or receive a refund. And we're working on pricing for the virtual event, et cetera. It's been a really tough decision, again, related to that 70% of our revenue, but we feel good about where we are as an organization, and the feedback has been extremely positive so far from all of our key stakeholders. And obviously we continue to negotiate our contracts. This is by far our most important event and revenue stream of the organization. We have some smaller events that and courses that we actually typically will hold in our office. We have significant meeting space in our office. All of those have been transitioned to virtual, and we expect that will continue for the foreseeable future, just based on the work that our members are doing and the lack of clarity around when things might, quote unquote, come back to normal. So we're operating as if we'll be virtual for a while, and maybe so far as our board meeting in November. But that's a very high level. Obviously, a lot more went into this decision, and happy to answer any questions when we get to that point of this program. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Christy. Obviously, and all this done in less time than it takes us to plan all these events over the course of the years, but in 4 or 5 weeks, I know it's a lot. Lori, would love for you to tell us, there's some similarities, but yet a lot of differences too with your organization and your meeting.
Absolutely. First, it's great to see all of you. I really miss being around people. This isn't a perfect substitute, but it will have to do. So it's hard on us extroverts, that's for sure, being in isolation. ISA is a trade association made up of manufacturers of signs, graphics, and visual communications. Our trade show brings about 20,000 sign and graphics professionals together annually. It's held alternately in Las Vegas and Orlando, and it's primarily a heavy equipment show with over 600 exhibitors and some 250,000 net square feet of exhibit space. We have some seminar program, but the primary reason for attending ISA Sign Expo is the trade show. So virtual just isn't an option. It's an equipment show. You don't buy a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment without seeing it and being able to see how it works. And so virtual simply just wasn't an option. So a note for this discussion is that we have communicable disease insurance, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. It's not the panacea that you'd think it is. I'll just say that. So our event was supposed to be April 2 through 4. We were full steam ahead through January and February with pre-registration actually higher than in previous years. Despite the news coming from abroad, we were tracking extraordinarily well with attendance. In mid-February, when the virus cases in the US were starting to take hold, anxiety then started to take hold with our exhibitors and attendees. We were, of course, hearing about travel bans as everyone else was. Now, some exhibitors had already shipped their equipment for their booths, but the majority were holding their booth shipments because of the virus situation. So we were at a critical must-decide moment because the exhibitors had to ship their booths within the next, like, say, 24 to 36 hours if they were going to get those pieces of equipment to Orlando. So this was the very beginning of March. Now, so we're all in this time warp that things are going extraordinarily fast and slow kind of at the same time. The 1st of March feels like it was a lifetime ago. And yet days fly by and you're exhausted like you've run a marathon. It's the most interesting work situation I think any of us have ever been. So here we were at a decision point in the 1st of March, cancel, postpone, or stay the course. So what do? Well, we have to gather data, of course. So I'll talk about the data, the gathering portion, and then the process to make the decision. I'll start with the data. So there's 2 different perspectives to look at. First, there's outsized forces beyond your control that have a tremendous impact on your event. One of those was political. We were in Orlando. The governor of Florida was adamant that the state would not shut down. Our communicable disease insurance required that the state or local authorities shut down the facility. And the governor was not budging on that point. Even when there was a federal ban of travelers from China and cases were increasing in the country, the convention center was still open. So that meant that the insurance company felt we could still put on the event. So the next set of data points was looking at the factors within your control. And so the outside of your control is some of the insurance portions and then the politics. Inside of your control, well, the Chinese exhibitors were prevented from entering the country, so we could file a claim on to mitigate the losses there. So now the insurance companies require you to do everything possible to mitigate the losses. So we explored looking for an alternate date. A show of our size, not an easy thing, but the Orange County Convention Center had some dates in August that were open. So again, this is 1st of March. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we jumped at it, and then we had to put together an analysis and call an emergency board meeting. So like Christy said, we had a COVID team just looking at this every possible way. So the process, we collected the data points, the political reality, the unknowns with the insurance claim, any way we could reduce expenses as much as possible, considering it's likely if we moved to August, it wouldn't be the full-blown show that April would be. It's just that would be sort of an obvious thing. And so those were the things we had within our control. We created scenarios that included the outside of our control and the things within our control, and developed 3 or 4, I think it was 4 options from worst to most likely. You had to combine worst case to best case to least likely and most likely, and you kind of have to match them up. So the board met, and it wasn't a unanimous decision. Again, this is the beginning of March. People were still believing it wasn't going to come here. They still felt that it's not going to happen here like it was happening beginning to happen in Italy or in China. And so at one point, the board meeting, it stopped and they just said, staff, what do you think? And so we have our ear to the ground. We know what the reality is with these exhibitors, just literally waiting to get those pieces of equipment on a truck to send down to Orlando. And we said we just didn't think there was any other option but to postpone. Now, like Christy has a heavy weight of her budget, vast majority, about 90% of her budget is this show. And so clearly it was an enormous decision for the staff as well as the board. You have to look at the things outside of your control and within your control, develop those scenarios and rank them for best to worst or likely to least likely, however you need to rank them, so you can make and advantages and disadvantages to each of those options. And then lastly, I could not stress enough the importance of documenting absolutely everything with your insurance company. We still don't know where this is going to be, even though we have a communicable disease insurance. And so you have to start right now. If you're thinking about an event in the future, plan now for litigation. You may never experience litigation, but you need to start planning now that that's the case. Anticipate that you will. If you're fortunate enough to have communicable disease insurance, it still isn't a given that you'll get your claim. And so you'll have to plan budget-wise for legal expenses as well. So we've already taken steps and so our event is now the end of August. So we may be putting this Zoom meeting again on later, and who knows what will happen between now and August. We hope that things will get better, people will be healthy, they find maybe a miracle vaccine or whatever, right, so that we're able to have our event. We've already taken steps to go virtual for all of our board meetings for the remainder of the year, and we're starting to even look at early next year, mostly for budget reasons than anything else. And we have a 150-person small event in June. We've already canceled that and have moved, but the hotel was very accommodating in helping us move to the following year. And so I'll end with a quote from the famous philosopher Snoopy the dog. Keep looking up, and that's the secret of life, and that's all we can do. I will say that this showcases associations at their finest. I don't think I would have survived the past couple months without the incredible support from the association community that really has come together in phenomenal ways, and we just exemplify what it means to be an association when we come together and support each other like this.
Awesome, Lori. Thank you so much. And want to thank you because you were one of the first individuals to kind of say ASA needs to be putting on some content as it relates to the issues that associations are dealing with. And we started with our webcasts that we're doing pretty much every week, and then started these CEO dialogues. So a lot of good stuff, and all of those are recorded and available for people to watch. So thank you for making us accountable. We appreciate that. Irving, we would love to hear from you and hear your story and about your members and what you're dealing with.
Yeah, Lori made my job a little challenging. I didn't know I was going to go after a quote from Snoop Dogg. That's a tough act to follow there. But hello, everyone. Again, my name is Irving Washington. My organization is the Online News Association. So we're a membership organization of roughly 3,000 journalists and innovators from across the globe. We're primarily domestic, about a 10 to 15% international membership. And our folks work at news organizations from all scopes and sizes. So whatever your local TV station, newspaper might be, to larger brands such as New York Times, CNN, and then the innovation space, such as a lot of the digital startups that are happening now, as well as the technology group. So it spans a wide variety of members, both from small size organizations to really big organizations. And the unique thing, I guess everyone thinks it's about their conference maybe, but our unique proposition with our membership is that, no surprise, the news industry is not necessarily on an upward trajectory right now, but our folks are the ones who are inspired, and they're making a difference, and they feel really energized by interacting with the ONA community. So our mission is about inspiration, and that's what brings us together. In the context of meetings and events, not to repeat what my fellow panelists have said, what we were faced with, and I think it's important to look at time-wise, because to Lori's point, I feel like every day has been a new week, and every week is a new year. So just to put context of February, March, April, in February, leading into March, what we were faced with at the time, we had one international event, which was estimated to be about 200 people with a partner. We have about 80 local chapters across the globe who host smaller events on their own as a volunteer-based initiative. We had 2 to 3 200-person-ish events we were planning for the summer. And then we had our large, annual meeting, which is about 3,000 people attend to that meeting. Staff-wise, I forgot to mention just the profile for what we are. We are a small, mid-sized staff. We have 11 staff members. So for context of just the meeting, in February, March, the annual meeting wasn't the first thing on our mind. Because we were a small staff, we were actually thinking everything else in terms of getting the staff together, communicating with the board, just thinking through all the things that were immediate and all the other programming that we do. We do a lot of other programming. So the annual meeting wasn't necessarily top of mind. And I think what's good about these sessions is also share things that maybe didn't go well or what you would have thought back. And I think we, myself, suffered a little bit from that bias. I think Christy mentioned this the other day to me. There's a little bit of bias because our annual meeting, which I did not say, is in the end of September. So I think there's this part of you're seeing what's happening to your other colleagues, you're noting it, but at the time, particularly around the February-ish, it seems like this might get, curtailed in April or the summer. And so a lot of people were saying this, "Whoa, you're lucky," right? Like that was the kind of messaging. So looking back, I think that's another thing to be mindful of for those of us who have later meetings, and even, think about 2021, I think we don't get too comfortable in terms of any of the bias. And another thing a board member said to me yesterday, which I'm holding to heart, was she's a provost, and one of the things she said in this situation, even though we've only been in it in a relatively few months, she said, one thing I'm learning is whatever decision I thought was cautious, it hasn't been cautious enough. And so that's one of the things that we're actually holding. So for the list of events that I just listed prior to the annual, we were able to quickly make the call that those events would turn virtual. And that was primarily with the leadership team. We had to communicate that out into the staff, our local groups, our local chapters, and the board was updated via our listserv and emails to let them know those events have minor impact on our bottom line. For our annual meeting, it does represent 60% of our revenue, so it is a sizable portion. But this is where I do think for those of us, again, who our big meeting is in the fall, where we've been able to pivot right now, is that it does give, not a lot, but it gives a little bit of leeway to have some thinking time. Where actually we've done scenario planning, and it's based off of, I'm happy to share it, it's First Capital's, I think it's scenario response planner. And we've done some scenario planning at a pretty large scale, not just the events, because one of the things we did realize, March was just putting out fires. We were just putting things out left and right, and we weren't able to take a step back to say, okay, how is this impacting the strategy that we've laid out? We just approved a new strategy in January 2020, and even though this is about meetings, I think one framework I would give for those of us that do have time, because some people are literally right in the thick of it, but kind of pull back a little bit and think about what is the overall strategy. So now we've designed a framework around, various scenarios, and more broadly, how do we think the world will look like in various time points, and then take that macro, go down to micro. How does this impact us overall? So we did that exercise, which is somewhat depressing, but we went through that exercise as well too, and then that broke down to our annual meeting. And so where we are right now in the decision process, and I think people said this before, we've also had time when we've been able to talk to all the key parties involved. We've had several conversations with our attorneys. We've talked to our insurance broker, our insurance adjuster, to get a lay of the land in terms of what our options are. So we've done that due diligence. And we've also laid out a set of 11 decision-making criteria that we're looking at specifically for the annual meeting. The last thing I would just say in terms of how we're thinking about this, which this is, surprise for a journalism group. Again, if you kind of take a step back, it's communication. One of the things that we've done, again, not just with the meeting overall, but how do you communicate to your community in a time of crisis like this and a long-term crisis? That's been probably the most challenging thing. We had a conversation the other day, and I think this is challenging for all of us, is we have to be okay with the sentence, "we don't know," period, and nothing else comes after that. And that's, quite frankly, very scary, but we've kind of had to sit in that for a little bit. And then, of course, make plans on that. But again, we don't know. So we've been thinking through a lot about how do we communicate overall as an organization, and particularly on the event side too, like how can the larger communication strategy roll down to the event. So we spent a lot of time talking about how we want to lead with empathy and authenticity, and think through how we want to do that. So where we stand right now, and this is an ever-changing piece, we do have plans for the event in September. We're doing a double track right now where we do think, there's a strong possibility it will be a virtual event. And we are pulling models from our various journalism colleagues, where there's a theory of, a trusting news project. And one of the things is, I think we're used to doing things either by committees or making these plans behind closed doors, but we're really thinking from a communication standpoint, let's just open it up and tell people what we're dealing with and why we need the support of either registration or donations, and just be kind of transparent as we can and authentic about the annual meeting for this year.
I love you had some Snoopy one-liners in there too, the transparency and what your provost was saying to you and that type of thing. And I think those are things it is important to say, we're working on that. We don't know that yet. You only have a reference of previous crisis, but none have been like this. Even if you were around 9/11, the financial downturn and everything, you can look at financials and use that to help inform, but this is still different, right? So I think, more information, but people are pivoting as quickly as possible. And Colleen, would you mind sharing with us about what you're seeing with some of your groups? And you had a group that was in the midst of a meeting, right?
Yes, we did. So it's a pleasure being here with you today. So at Association Management Center, we serve more than 25 clients, and they're predominantly in the healthcare associations. So the last annual conference we held was HOPA Ahead 2020. It was held March 11th to 14th in Tampa. And HOPA is Hematology Oncology Pharmacy Association. So this was a live event, and virtual streaming was planned already. As an association of healthcare professionals, the board was well aware of COVID-19 and the threat it posed, had deliberate conversations, included staff to make that decision to go forward. So the week before the conference, registration was holding steady. We had 1,200 registrants, 200 virtual attendees, and we only had 33 cancellations. So communication was sent to attendees, exhibitors, sponsors that we were forging ahead, and we were following the CDC, WHO guidelines, communicated health and safety practices to attendees, and we worked with a convention center and hotels relating to health and safety. So as we approached the meeting, and institutional travel bans were being implemented, which impacted both faculty and attendees. So we adjusted. Sessions were held with speakers presenting both on-site and remotely. Day one ran very smoothly, but day two, March 12th, was a day that I think none of us will ever forget. We learned that morning that an attendee from the EMS conference, which was held in the building just 6 days prior to ours, one of the attendees tested positive for COVID-19. Media was expected at the center. We notified the board right away, and a senior leader from the Florida Department of Health addressed the convention center staff, and we sat in on that meeting. And we asked what the risk was to our attendees, and he indicated that it was a low to medium risk. So we reconvened the board, and had difficult decision to make, thoughtful discussion, but it was too risky. The board made the decision for the safety of attendees and guests and staff to cancel the meeting at the end of that day. So attendees were informed right away. And then we were faced with determining how we would provide the content from the remaining sessions to attendees. So once again, we pivoted, we worked with the speakers, and we scheduled their sessions as live webinars and provided attendees the option of watching live or the recording. So, I mean, what I would say is there is no playbook for any of this. With all of the scenario planning and the crisis management planning we did going into this meeting, we never in a million years would have predicted that this would have happened and that would have been the outcome. And that day, you know, it was announced that March Madness was supposed to take place in Tampa. That was canceled. Schools were canceling. Life as we knew it was forever changed that day. So since then, we have had 5 other annual conferences in the spring, 4 of those being healthcare, with anticipated of attendance between 800 and 2,500 attendees that were supposed to take place between March and May. I echo the comments of Lori and Irving that this past month has felt like a year's worth of mitigation, countless conversations with legal counsel, insurance brokers, hotels, convention centers, staff, finance, senior leadership. All of those meetings did cancel. We did focus on the facts that we knew at the time, right? It's at that point in time what you're dealing with. And so with all of those, we did charter different scenarios of go, no go, looked at the financials, worst case scenarios, worked with staff and leadership. And in all cases, yeah, the board made the final decision. It was really their fiduciary responsibility. I think the board conversations were very thoughtful and heartfelt. With both me all being in healthcare, they're on the front line. And so the risk was uncertain to proceed, and there was a fear of being vectors and bringing that back to their patients. So all of the time, effort, dedication, and excitement in planning the conferences was gone, and it was really emotional. So now we are, so we're finishing up mitigating those, converting some to virtual, and now we're focusing on our summer and our fall conferences and really working heavily on the contingency planning, doing different scenarios regarding live, hybrid, virtual. I am an optimist, but I'm also a realist in regards to our conferences scheduled through 2020. I think we're seeing reduced budgets and reluctance of people to travel. We also received notification yesterday from a chairperson of one of our healthcare associations that in the wake of COVID-19 and the impacts of their organization, that the hospital has decided to cancel all non-business essential activities for employees to include conference attendance. So they will be supported virtually to attend, but not in person. And even if they were to pay for the conference on their own and utilize PTO, they can't attend in any way and represent the hospital due to the organizational risk and liability. So that is something I anticipate we'll see more of, and certainly will have an impact on our fall offerings.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences too. And certainly types of organizations and types of meetings and what was done with them. I mean, certainly the projections that we're making for 2020, but also how quickly is it going to rebound? Like we were saying, it's not just meetings, it's membership and so many other support aspects that we have to take into consideration for sure. I know we have over 500 people on this call, and Karen Bernstein, who I introduced a little earlier, she is our Senior Manager of Learning. You all are very engaged online, and we have over 50 questions. So she's going to try to aggregate some of those. So I'm going to let her share a question, and then maybe we'll ask our panelists, if you're feeling so compelled to respond, let us know and we'll come to you. Karen, you're on mute. Let's unmute. Thank you. We need to hear you.
Yeah,
There
we go. You saw my lips moving. So thank you, Amy. And as Amy indicated, there are over 50 questions, and I've been working feverishly to try and put them into different buckets. One sort of common denominator from all of the presenters is how creative and resilient we need to be, and how oftentimes we need to do this, you know, at the drop of a hat, and lessons learned from all of those. So the buckets that I'm seeing are the transition to virtual events and questions that fall in that category, the decision-making strategy that you all employed, and the degree to which you're comfortable sharing how those decisions were made, and then the emotional aspects of this on your staff, on your attendees, and how receptive people are to the changes. So I'm going to go to the first bucket with regard to moving to virtual, and pose a few of those questions to all of you. One would be the platforms that you're looking at, but I do, take a step back and mention to folks that we did have a webcast a week or so ago on virtual events that provided really excellent information that you can find on our resource page on the ASAE website. The text of that, the slides with that, and a lot of information about the types of platforms that fit well with the size groups and the type of meeting that you're going to have. So we may not today answer all your questions about platforms in general, but more about the decision to go virtual and the reasons behind it, and how you incorporated things like exhibit halls and sponsorship packages. Those are two very specific pieces that several questions came in about. So they first came into Christy, so I'm going to throw it to you first, and then if
Sure.
the others could speak about sponsorship and exhibits and how you were able to transfer that to virtual events.
And Christy,
Sure.
can I just pipe in and ask you if you were already doing hybrid events, or was your team doing anything virtual? Okay, just
No.
good to know. Okay.
This was all completely new. And so we have not signed the contract with the platform. So I want to be careful about saying, I know there are a lot about what did we land on. I'm happy to, if anyone wants to email me directly, share that information. But we did look at really settle on 3 that we taking very seriously. And I would say, if you think there's even a possibility, I would start to reach out. One of the platforms that we initially reached out to probably almost 4 weeks ago, in that first week that we reached out, had gotten over 1,200 requests for proposals. And so one of our, the reason we moved pretty quickly, even before we knew we were going to go 100% virtual, is we wanted to be in the queue should we have to do that and start that contract process. We looked at, because we are so complex, we've looked at Communique Zapnito, which is one I had never heard of before. It's a British-based company that a consultant we had been working with on some new aspects of our meeting prior to all of this had identified, and we spent a lot of time on that. Freeman, who's our show decorator, has a platform. And then, but what we have realized is that none of them have everything we would want. And so we've had to look at how they integrate with our LMS, how they integrate with, we use Map Your Show for our booth selection, whether or not we use Map Your Show for the virtual aspect. And so there is no perfect platform. And I think a lot of our decision making has been around, and some of it driven by the insurance issues that Lori mentioned around how you mitigate. And so we've learned that we need to have a finite beginning and end to our meeting that's over the same dates as part of the mitigation aspect of our insurance policy. And so we're looking at because you start thinking, oh, we could spread this out over 12 months and we could reach more people and, and have more engagement longer term as an option. But what we realized is that we have to have a virtual event that coincides with when our meeting would begin, because you have to have really good records of what revenue you were able to bring in for that event to show that offset or trying to mitigate your losses, and that'll eventually impact your insurance claim and what you may or may not get from your insurer. And so I would just say that you have to really, I want to emphasize the conversations with your insurer, your broker, and the broker connected us with an adjuster, and we're having weekly insurance calls with the adjuster and the broker to ensure that we're collecting the right information. You have to have extremely detailed financial records, communication records, et cetera. And you would not necessarily, I certainly would have had no idea to think about how we frame up this virtual event could impact that. And so I'm happy to, again, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I can tell you who we're hoping to get a contract signed in the next day or so. We've been negotiating hard with one of those that I mentioned. Sorry now, I can't remember if there was a second part of that for me, but on the exhibitors. So we have offered all exhibitors a deadline, which is next week, by which to tell us whether they want to roll over their funds to 21 or to cancel just for live event. The ability to participate in the virtual event is separate. We're going to offer different pricing, or we are offering different pricing for whether or not they will roll over and participate in the virtual. If they're not pricing around how they're participating with us in the future and now. What we're finding is thus far, for those that have responded, the big companies are rolling over. The small companies or even startup companies that are cash poor are canceling. And then there's this whole big group in the middle that we've not heard from at all. So we're doing a lot of outreach because we've let them know that they need to respond or they will be automatically rolled over in the next week. So hopefully that helps with some folks who are wondering how we're managing that piece.
Karen, I'm just going to add one other piece of that, which I like about this webinar is there's very few things that normally we're doing this in retrospective, and now it's like, this is what's happening right now. It may not be valid tomorrow. The only thing I would add to Christy is that we've tried to break, we're literally in this process now, so we don't have the full framework, but we've tried to break that question down to like, what are we going to do with exhibitors and all these sort of things, and look at the data and say, okay, we've surveyed our sponsors and exhibitors for the past several years. They make X number of contacts. So instead of us saying, how are we going to replace exhibit hall, it's how can we provide value so that exhibitors meet 10 potential sources, right? And so that has been helpful to start a conversation where it's taking a very big problem and making it more tangible.
A specific question about virtual pricing, and that when you have gone from an in-person program to a virtual, how are you assessing how much you should charge for it? Are you offering it for free? What does that model look like?
We're certainly charging less. We're looking at this as equity building. We've been watching all the various listservs for all the groups we belong to try to see what others are doing as well. We are not going to offer it for free. And even for us, our exhibitors on our live event can give out so many free passes to our event. And so we will not be offering that for those that participate in the virtual event. So we're significantly reducing our pricing for virtual. I assume that we haven't landed on it, but it's going to be in the very manageable time frame, and then there will be packages for whatever life goes beyond the 3 days. But we've focused really on the exhibitors first, and then also understanding the platform capabilities, because as Irving just said, the ability to match exhibitors to attendees, we want to ensure we get that right, because there's a lot of complexity around how our exhibitors need to do business with our attendees. And so we're trying to focus on where we can provide the most value to everyone in the short term, and build that greater value for us long term, because we do have a lot of competitors in the space, for big billion-dollar for-profit competitors, and thankfully we're learning that we can provide that empathetic response that's a very different tone than some of those competitive events as well. And so that's going into our decision making.
Does anyone else want to respond to these before we move on?
Yeah, I would just add that we are seeing too with our different healthcare associations that they are also looking at charging a reduced fee for virtual. And generally it's been about 50% or a little more of what the typical in-person registration fee would be.
And one person just wrote as a follow-up to that, is the idea that when you go virtual, you may have multiple people in a room watching the same presentation as opposed to attending as individuals. Have any of you thought of group pricing for virtual? So I just posed a new wrinkle.
No, we have not. But what we have heard from some of our chapters, we call them sections, is that they're hoping to piggyback on our virtual experience and see how they can bring people together, particularly for some of our international partners as well that wouldn't normally be able to come to the event. We would love to have more eyes on the sessions and are just going to have an individual purchase price. We assume there could be multiple people in a room in some scenarios, but a lot of people we anticipate will also still be working virtually in July, or at least to some extent.
Okay. Let's move to the question about decision-making processes and sort of how far out you're doing your scenario planning. I do want to mention that we have a program coming up on May 5th that is going to be specifically on scenario planning, but some of you don't want to wait till May 5th, so we'll definitely ask our presenters now to talk a little bit about how far out you're projecting in terms of future programs and the processes that you went through to make the decision you made now. I know that Irving referenced a document. Any references to particular resources from our presenters, we will add to the resource page on our website when we post both the chat and the recording of this.
So I'll start. We are now in the process of developing cash flow analysis for 2021. And this is where we're all going to be completely unsure of what to do, because again, those factors that are outside of our control, and it's, will, in the case of, well, all of us, will the stimulus packages, will they work? You know, will they help boost the economy enough to make people feel comfortable to attend event and spend the money on event? And very importantly, will there be a second wave? How will the curve be flattened? And all of these are outside of your control. So you have to look at a scenario that includes those options. In the worst case, there's another second wave that's as bad or even worse than it is now, or that things get better, a vaccine is found, etc., and the stimulus package works. And you basically have to just kind of guess in a lot of respects. there was someone who had asked about how is our event in August shaping up in terms of exhibits. Right now, we think we're going to be down maybe 40%. And so the insurance, it's still unknown as to how much that's mitigated. So that's still a huge unknown. But we have to assume that 2021 will not be the full great event that it's always been. And I think that was across the board for every single event through at least the first quarter or second quarter of 2021 for economic reasons, if not for all those other reasons.
And Karen, the only thing I would add, just because it seemed like people wanted specific, a couple of resources. I referenced First Round Capital's Scenario Response Planner. So we use that to do like sort of large scale scenario responses. And then the second resource that was helpful, Board Source. And again, I think all of these resources are pretty similar, so anyone can find something that works for them. Board Source, you can look that up. It says what nonprofit board members should be doing right now to address COVID-19. So there's 4 questions in there that you can sort of center your board on and organization to address. They're all risk management questions. So what we did do though, and I think this is really helpful for people, we added one additional question, which gave some inspiration, was how can we seize this opportunity to lead our community in bigger and better ways, in addition to those risk management questions. And those have been some framing that we've been doing as we've been planning out. And for now, we're planning for 2020.
Okay. In terms of the decision-making framework, can you all comment briefly on your messaging to your various stakeholders and where you're messaging at what juncture during your decision-making? Because, you know, when you've got a meeting coming up, I'm sure you're getting lots of questions from members about where it's going to be and where your decision-making is. And so how are you managing that information going externally?
I can start. And I've seen some questions about when our meeting was the middle of July. I think board meeting started on the 14th. And so we were mid-July and in Chicago. And I should have said, I saw a question about this, Chicago for 10 years in a row, which definitely helps us in our cancellation. At least it seems to be helping us. We're just in the midst of all that. But I would say our first message went out to members end of February to basically, we're monitoring it. We will be transparent and communicate. We're, watching, the what WHO and CDC, et cetera, a very brief message. And then exhibitors, we sent a more specific one around that same time as well. And, when we did our transition announcement, I alluded to it, but we were very thoughtful we told to Chicago first, then we went to the major event partners, then we went to global sales for the hotels because we had 35 hotels in our block. And then simultaneous to that was key speakers, et cetera, and then to the greater membership. And so it was very thought out and executed kind of simultaneously, but wanted to make sure the right people heard first, followed by the greater, already registered attendees, and then the bigger audience.
Anyone else want to comment on messaging?
Yeah, I can comment as well. We also had very thought out process and posted updates on the website, and the date of the posting was included on the website. Nothing was taken down, so there was a running list also, which was helpful for the insurance claim. We were very transparent with everyone involved, and so it moved rather quickly, I would say, right? And I did see a couple of questions as well about force majeure for the programs that we held through May. We were able to cancel and implement force majeure for all of those meetings based on travel bans, no social gatherings. It's really important to watch each state and, the regulation. We would have a go, no-go date, but sometimes we put off that decision a little bit, knowing that, oh, the governor is going to have a, a conference or press release, anticipating that they're going to put in that travel ban, because the conversations with hotels prior to that were, no, you would have to pay the cancellation fee. So some were negotiating more than others. So it was it was a waiting game for a lot of our groups to cancel.
So I wanted to just jump in here because I know we're just at the 3 o'clock hour, and I wanted to mention just with regard to communications, because there's been some questions about even ASAE's annual meeting, and we have not been pushing registration. Actually, registration, the website opened a while ago, but it was right when things were unfolding and it didn't seem like an appropriate time. Now people are saying, are you even having the meeting? So some of the best communication I've actually seen from organizations, whether they've canceled or are continuing on, or video messaging from the CEO, and in that sense of transparency. And so you'll be hearing from us, but ASAE is planning on moving forward with its annual meeting, also planning on a virtual aspect. We don't know what that is yet. It won't be the whole meeting for sure, but so we're getting a group together to kind of map that out. But we understand it's going to be, if it moves forward, certainly a smaller event. But we also think people are so cabin feverish that people might really be just desperate to get together. Then we have a whole nother challenge, which then we're working on, I know is a discussion in the industry, is how do you implement a safe meeting with a large gathering? And so we're starting those discussions, and other industry organizations are actually starting those as well. I actually heard from one of my team members that airlines right now are saying they're not selling any middle seats anymore. So if there's ever a silver lining, I don't know. But it's also, understanding that organizations' travel budgets, lack of not allowing team members to travel, not having the budget because having to make budget cuts for their own organization. We know all of that could be happening. And so the video, the virtual option is certainly there. But even speakers canceling, not being able to speak at the conference. So I was saying to the team, well, we have to provide a virtual option for that. We don't want half our program to be canceled. So we're working on that as well. But also the question came up about the nervousness of staff traveling. And I think we may see some of that. And so we're working on contingency plans. Are these some roles that we could have temp help, or are there some things that we'll have to do without at our annual meeting just because of coverage and things of that sort? But I think those are all questions. I really want to thank our panelists. You all are awesome for taking time out. We know that you have some really big issues to deal with, like everybody else on this call. We're happy at ASAE that we're able to bring the community together and start those conversations and connect folks. And as we've been mentioning throughout this conversation, ASAE's roundup page, if you just go to the ASAE website and type in coronavirus, you'll get to the update page. And then there is a connection, a link for all the webcasts that are there in the handouts. So if you forget what it is, that roundup page has documents and other resources. And certainly we can reference resources that we have heard here as well. But again, we will be having another one of these dialogues next Friday, same place, same time, at 2 o'clock. And again, that will be with regard to workforce challenges, as Lori was just mentioning about budgets and going into the next year. What is it going to look like, and what are some of those issues that organizations are going to be faced with less resources perhaps, and how they can manage staff and things of that sort. We also have a webcast that we're doing. We did have a conversation on Monday with some of our congressional representatives about the legislation. But we also have one association advocacy, the CARES Act and future legislation, and that's taking place on Tuesday the 21st at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So we are trying to do this just in time webcasts and conversations, hopefully to help all of us, guide us in our decision making. And we get a lot of our ideas by looking at Collaborate and the various threads that we're seeing. So we love your feedback because we know there's more conversations to be had. So again, want to thank you all. And I'll just see if Karen has, if there's any burning question that must be answered. If not, I just want to thank our panelists again for being with us and sharing your stories and helping inform how we might go about making some decisions in the future.
There are many burning questions, but we will try and answer them offline so that we can make the responses available to everyone. I too would direct everyone to our resource page where all the webcasts are housed. Both the ones that have been and the ones that are coming up, we'll be posting everything there. Including the recording from today, which will be up in about a week. So if you wanted to share it with colleagues, please direct them there as well. And I also want to echo Amy's thanks to all of our great presenters.
And I heard Lester Holt's closing comment when he signs off in the evening. It's take care of yourself and take care of each other. So I'll leave you with that and look forward to seeing you all. And I wish we were all going to be convening at a cocktail party, but that will happen hopefully soon enough. So not soon enough, but hopefully soon. So take care and thank you for being with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.